Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bella Gamer, and today we're back with another archetype from the normal archetype list. It's been a while. It's been 3 weeks, I think. 2 weeks? No, 3 weeks since, yeah, because we had 2 weeks of Dark Archive. I don't know, maybe there's a lost week in there. I've been so busy. We're back with another in the list categorically, and I'll let you all know now that when we go back and do the updated tier list for the C to D, any archetypes that showed up in that range will be shown on that list, but I will not be adding the archetypes that are outside the A to D range, mostly because it's just easier for me to keep track of things this way, and it makes it a lot better for me personally. So sorry, but you're just gonna have to wait for some of those I guess some of my ratings on some of the archetypes. As with always with these videos, if you like it, leave a like, and if you want to see more like it, subscribe. That makes it more likely for you to see these videos when they come out, and for the archetype list when that gets updated. Not only that, but you can join the Discord linked down in the description, where you'll get notified when videos go up or when we go live, as well as we talk all things tabletop, including games like Warhammer 40k, and I always recruit there first for any of my games. So if you want to play with me and my friends, that's the place to be. And if you want something a little less committal, the Twitter is linked down below as well, where I try to shout out every new upcoming thing we have on the channel. But with that, let's go ahead and get into this. And I'm actually very excited for this archetype because it is one of my favorites. If you've seen my top 5 favorite archetype videos, it will be up here. Again, I'm getting used to this. New YouTuber. Up here, title, a little info card here will take you to my top 5 archetypes. If I remember to put it in. Sometimes I forget, but I always usually eventually do it. So, you know. Let's go ahead and talk today about the Captivator. The Captivator is a very interesting archetype and is one of my favorites because the general idea behind the Captivator is that you have such a good way with words, you have such a magnetic charisma that the actions you take on spell-like properties, essentially allowing you to cast spells with your words and actions. It's very, very interesting. Mechanically speaking, none of the spells here really do all that much, but if we take a look at the dedication right down here, you'll see that when you are using these innate occult spells that you get with the dedication, you can cast any material components that don't have a goal value with just somatic components. So you don't need a focus or anything like that to use this kind of magic. Makes sense for the most part, and honestly, that's not too unusual for most spellcasters anyway. Now, the Captivator does have a bit of a hefty price. You have to have a charisma of 14, and you have to be trained in both deception and persuasion, I believe. Right? No, deception and diplomacy. Right. Diplomacy, not persuasion. I played too many different games, all right? So, more or less what this does is you get 2 cantrips from the occult spell list. I'm trying to get my computer in order. And not only that, but you choose between either your deception or diplomacy, and you become either trained in that. It's and or. It is and or. So you either become trained in the other skill, or you become an expert in the skill you use to take this proficiency, which I think is pretty cool. So you get a skill increase. You actually get the ability to cast a spell. A lot of innate spellcasting, a lot of players don't know this, being able to cast magic doesn't mean you gain access to the cast a spell activity. Innate spells, even though you use all the same actions to cast them, are innate to you, meaning you can't learn new spells from it, and it means you can't use magic items like wands or staves that have that kind of tradition. This uses the occult spell list, which means that once you pick up Captivator, you can use occult wands or occult scrolls, staves, whatever, to cast those spells, which is a pretty big boon, honestly. And if you're not already trained in occult spell casting, you become trained in both their DCs and attack rolls, and you use charisma as your casting modifier if you don't already have access to occult spells. Overall, the beginning dedication is pretty good. It's got a bit of a hefty price for it, but it's not really that much different than any of the multi-class spell casting archetypes, and this gives you a lot of the same kind of benefits. Not only that, because you get it at level 4, it makes it a little rough to start out with in your game if you're using the bonus archetype feat. And to that, I am just going to say, with always, it's up to your GM. I would personally allow a player to pick it up at level 2 to pick it up, you know, to keep going to make things easier, or you can always just pick it up at a later level after level 6 to get some of the good feats. And honestly, that's not a bad option either. This is a really good archetype, but the biggest thing that's important is that when you get spells from this archetype, including the cantrips, you can only pick from the enchantment or illusion spells from the occult spell list. Good thing the occult spell list has almost all the enchantment and illusion spells, but this is a much more limited spell casting archetype in exchange for a little bit more functionality with those types of spells. But we'll get into that with their later feats. Alright, next up is the basic Captivator spellcasting, and I'm going to pull it up here because I don't remember what the levels are and I can't remember for the life of me. So you'll have to bear with me. But when you pick this up, starting at level 4, you can choose a first level occult spell from either the enchantment or illusion school. And then when you hit level 6, you can pick a second level, and when you hit level 8, you can get a third level. Each of these spells must be from the enchantment or illusion school. And yeah, you can cast each of these once per day. Pretty good, pretty standard, basic. It's kind of like being a repertoire caster, but you don't get spell slots. Instead, you just get spells that you can cast from each level. Next up is Captivating Intensity, which is more or less this school, or this archetype's version of the breath spells with a D, breath, which expands the number of times you can cast spells for spells that you gain. Now, this one is a little bit weaker because you can cast spells up to 2 less than your highest spell level. Sorry, I was processing that. For non-cantrip spells, your cantrips heighten normally, you don't have to worry about that. But essentially, with Captivating Intensity, as what it more or less means is that you can't even take Captivating Intensity when you can pick it up at level 6 anyway, because you can't cast any of your, you can't cast any of the spells that you currently have access to, which is really weird. I dislike some of the wonkiness that comes with Captivator, because it says right here, you gain an extra casting for spells other than your 2 highest spell levels from non-cantrip Captivator spells. When you pick this up at level 6, you only have access to level 1 and 2 spells, meaning that you can't use any of those for this feat, and it's completely pointless to take it at level 6. You can take it at level 8, and that's completely fine, and thus you kind of get a dead feat in the middle of this because there's no, well, essentially at level 4 you pick up Dedication, and level 6 you pick up Captivator spellcasting, and level 8 you pick up Captivating Intensity, because that's, I guess, how they wanted you to do it. I don't know, there's some weird design flaws with this one. I do absolutely love Captivator, but this is a weird one. Not only that, but this one has some crossover with another feat that we'll get to called Heightened Captivation. More or less what it does is that you gain an extra casting of that spell, but you gain an additional extra time you can cast that spell. And when you cast it for, I guess, the 3rd time in this situation, it's heightened to 2 levels lower than your highest level of cantrip or non-cantrip Captivator spell, as long as the spell can be cast at that spell level. It doesn't say you can't cast it if you can't, so maybe you can. I don't know. This one's really weird. More or less, whatever the spell you pick for the heightened captivation is, you can cast it for a 3rd time at 2 levels less than your highest spell level. This one works better at higher levels. It's just so weird that it's placed the way it is. Counter Charm is an absolutely amazing reaction, because what essentially it lets you do is, if the enemy is using an enchantment or illusion spell, you can use one of your spells that you have access to from Captivator. It's not technically a spell slot. I was going to say spell slot. And you expend it, and you use a reaction to attempt to counteract the spell as if you were counterspelling. This is really good, and not only that, but it goes beyond the normal form of counterspell, because normally with counterspell, you have to use the same exact spell to counter it. And even at higher levels, you can only use a spell that would appropriately counter it. This one just allows you to expend one of your spell slots, or one of your spells, to counter a spell, which is really good, and it makes you a very predominant enchantment illusion caster on the field pretty much. It's a very solid archetype, and Counter Charm's a really good feat. Heightened Captivation, which I did mention earlier, has a bit of crossover with the other one, the intensify captivation or whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is a really good feat because what it does is essentially you select one of the spells you have access to. At this point, you should have access to a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3 spell. And when you select that spell is now cast at your highest spell level. This is really good for a multitude of reasons, whether the spell has heightened levels or because it makes your spells harder to counterspell. And one of the other benefits to this is you can select this feat multiple times, selecting a different spell from your Captivator spell list. This is really good because if you take this enough times, eventually all your spells will be castable at your highest spell level, meaning that you gain access to a lot of high level spell slots. And let me just read it here because that sounds almost too good to be true. Choose one of your spells granted by a Captivator archetype feat. Yep. This spell can't be from your highest level of non-cantrip Captivator spells. Makes sense. The spell you choose is heightened to the highest level of Captivator spell you can cast, not including cantrips. You can't later change the spell that is heightened by this feat. Yeah, technically, it says you can't later change the spell that is heightened by this feat. I don't know what they mean, because technically you could just retrain the feat, and if, I guess, absolutely necessary, retrain it to a different feat, and then retrain it back into this one. So I don't know what they mean by that. I'm assuming they're kind of thinking from a player perspective of like, oh, if I level up, can I change the spell? In which case, no, you need to retrain the feat. Again, there's some kind of messiness when it comes to Captivator, but this is a really, really good feat, and it makes the Captivator very, very strong. Even though you can't pick the spell that is your current highest, it doesn't mean that you can't pick this up at a later level when you have more spells. Meaning that eventually you can cast all your spells at the highest level, which can get up to level 9. That's pretty crazy. And not only that, it doesn't say that you can cast currently. It's that you can cast, meaning that your spells will automatically heighten as you level up as well. This is a very good feat, and it makes the Captivator incredibly strong because essentially they start getting more spells at higher levels than even spellcasters. Alright, next one is Expert Captivator Spellcasting. This is just the expert version spellcasting feat that a lot of the other multi-class spellcasting gives you. The time that you pick this feat up, which is 10th level, you can cast a 4th level occult spell. At 12th, you can get 5th, and at 14th, you can get a 6th. Pretty good. That means that anytime normally you would be able to up for a normal caster, you can up it through this feat. Now, overall, you are casting essentially one spell level lower than a caster at this level would, but that's still pretty strong. Not only that, but this feat allows you to become expert in your spell attack rolls and DCs for your occult spells. Reactive Charm is one of the reasons why Captivator is just so good and is better than a multi-class archetype, at least for a particular style of casting. Because what it does is, as a reaction, you can use one of your first level spells, and I'm assuming it's a spell that has a first level version of it, because if you heighten your spells, then technically this one would become impossible to use. So I'm assuming you can cast a spell if it has a first level version, and as a reaction when an enemy is attacking you. And the best part about this is, and I believe it's, you are the target of a spell or attack. And if for whatever reason this would cause them to not attack you, for instance, you charm them, become friendly to you, they still get to keep their action, choosing a different target that is available. Now, the target does need to be a viable target for your spell to even take place, which only protects the players, because technically that means if the target is mindless or something, they're not a viable target, and thus you don't accidentally waste a spell. Overall, this is a really good reaction in general and really suits the Captivator perfectly. I love what the Captivator can do with this, and it's just a very solid archetype overall. And I really, really like it. I think these kind of feats, and it's balanced by the fact that it's limited to illusion and enchantment spells. Honestly, to get the most out of the Captivator, you need to be a smart player, and you need to be able to think outside the box with how some of the spells work. There are some very solid spells in the list, and even some good offensive ones as well. So you don't even have to be an innate spellcaster to really get a lot of benefits from Captivator. In fact, you could be a fighter, and as long as your charisma is decent, you're going to be doing some good level spellcasting because you can get up to master with Captivator, but we'll get to that here in one of the later feats. Effortless Captivation is essentially a meta magic that a lot of other spellcasters get, which allows you to, as a free action, you can sustain one of your spells. Isn't that great? Isn't that amazing? You immediately gain the effects of the sustain a spell action, which you use only to extend the duration of an enchantment or illusion spell. For an archetype dedication that's not a multi-class, this is amazing. Not only that, but as a non-native spellcaster, this is the only way you can get a feat like this. All of the feats that give you essentially a free sustain action every round are too high level to pick up with the feats that allow you to pick a feat of half your level or lower. So if you're a native spellcaster, even if you are a native spellcaster, this is a really good feat. This allows you to keep those spells going. Now, you have to have those spells in your spell list, essentially, which, could or could not be a factor. But this is an amazing feat to pick up in an archetype. Next up is Master Captivator Spellcasting, the same as any other Master Spellcasting feat from another multi-class spellcaster. And what it does is that when you pick this up at level 16, you get access to a 7th level spell. At 18, you get an 8th level spell. And at 20, you get a 9th level spell. Each of these spells must come from the enchantment or illusion tree. Duh, that's obviously what the archetype is about. And not only that, but you become a master at spell attack rolls and spell DCs for occult spells. This is, besides a multi-class archetype, the only way to get to master in spellcasting. And besides multi-class archetyping, I was getting myself confused there. Not only that, but you get access to almost the highest level of spells in the game. The only thing you're missing are 10th level spells, which more or less are the capstone abilities of spellcasters. So beyond being just a full-on spellcasting class, this archetype gives you a lot more spells. And you have a couple levels, if you really want to pick up the the heightened captivation to gain more higher versions of the spells. And you could potentially, I believe, get 6 or even you could get, I think, 8 9th level spells. I mean, that's all your spells, but you have 8 9th level spells. It could be 9 for all I know, but I'm not going to do the math on it. And you're a master spellcaster. That is really good, especially with the Thaumaturge that's come out recently. That is a charisma spellcaster. They fit perfectly into the Captivator. Now, there is one more feat, and it's not quite as impressive, but Look Again is still a great feat. It's a meta magic. You use an action before you cast a spell, and more or less what it does is that if the spell fails, you can reattempt the spell on your next turn, expending the same number of actions to cast the spell, and whether you pass or fail, the spell is then expended. So if it succeeds, good for you. If it's not, then you lose it on the second go around. Not a bad one. It lets you do your Captivator stuff, extra, and you can only do this once per day. It's really solid. It's not a very great feat, especially since you can pick it up at level 18. Honestly, picking up heightened captivation would be much better at this level, honestly, especially because beyond that level 20, you would take your last heightened captivation. So I absolutely love the Captivator. It's a really good archetype if you love thinking. It's one of my favorites, and it's something that can really get a lot of power, and this can add a really good amount of spellcasting to your non-spellcasters. In fact, if you are using the bonus archetype rule, this is the perfect way to add more functionality and ability to your martial characters. Because not only can your character be really good in combat, but you do have admittedly niche but high level spells at your fingertips when you're able to use this. I think the Captivator adds to a lot of different character types. I think this can be played in a lot of different ways that increase the character dynamics. Captivator is an amazing archetype, and it deserves to be in my top 5, and I hope I've won some people over on this archetype as well. But with that, we're going to go ahead and end this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I absolutely love the Captivator, and I enjoyed sharing it with y'all. Good luck with your games. Lead the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.